Today, we embark upon an examination of a rather rigorous framework for the pursuit of truth. It is one derived not from modern psychology, but from the deep philosophical traditions of Freemasonry. This, then, is an explainer on the concept of intellectual honesty, viewed as a Masonic blueprint for finding truth. We find ourselves in a peculiar moment in history, don't we? We are confronted daily by a landscape of information that's saturated with appeals to emotion, with personal conviction, and with what are now quite famously termed alternative facts. This environment, this post-truth era, poses a truly fundamental question. What methods, what tools can we possibly employ to distinguish a verifiable reality from a simply compelling narrative? How do we find our footing? Well, the solution may not lie in some new technology or fashionable ideology. Instead, it might be found in the careful application of a long-standing intellectual discipline. You see, an established philosophical architecture already exists, and it provides a systematic approach to this very problem. At the very heart of this system is a principle called intellectual honesty. And we must be clear, this is a concept that extends far beyond merely telling the truth in conversation. It demands a disciplined, almost scrupulous integrity in one's own private, internal thought processes. So let's define our central term with some precision. Intellectual honesty is a disciplined, uncompromising attitude toward one's own mind. It's a commitment to self-scrutiny. Now, its philosophical roots are quite deep. It draws from the German concept of redlichkeit, which is a wonderful word that fuses honesty with a kind of rational uprightness. And it also pulls from the French tradition of liberté de conscience, the absolute freedom and indeed the absolute responsibility of the individual's conscience. And here is a crucial point that must be understood from the outset. Intellectual honesty is not a static virtue one simply achieves, like a medal you can pin on your chest. No. It is a perpetual activity. It is a continuous work of construction, a constant process of examination and re-examination. You might think of it as being analogous to building a great cathedral, a temple that is, in principle, never fully complete. The work is lifelong. Now, the very foundation of this entire framework rests upon a critical distinction, an epistemological division, if you will, and that is the absolute separation of the concept of truth from the psychological state we call certainty. They are not the same thing. This slide illustrates a distinction that was absolutely central to the work of 20th century philosophers, people like Karl Popper and the members of the Vienna Circle. On one side, we have Wahrheit, the German word for truth. This is conceived as an objective correspondence with reality, something we seek, even if we can never fully grasp it. It is the goal of our journey. But on the other side, we have Gewissheit, or certainty. And this is the key. Certainty is not an attribute of reality. It is a subjective psychological state. It's a feeling of absolute conviction. And this feeling, far from being a reliable guide to the truth, can very often become the greatest impediment to finding it, because it shields our most cherished beliefs from necessary criticism. This statement truly encapsulates the entire argument. The serious pursuit of objective knowledge requires a radical, sometimes painful abandonment of our demand for subjective certainty. The moment an idea calcifies into a dogma, a belief that is held with absolute, unshakable certainty, the process of inquiry stops dead in its tracks. The search for truth requires, above all, epistemological humility. And this naturally leads us to the guiding principle of Wahrheitssuche, another wonderful German term meaning, quite simply, the search for truth. This is the commitment to an unending process. Within the symbolic language of Freemasonry, this entire endeavor is represented as the search for light. But light in this context is not some final blinding revelation. It is a progressive illumination, a continuous journey out of the darkness of ignorance and assumption, moving ever toward a greater, clearer understanding. Let us now turn from the theoretical to the practical. If one is to truly engage in this unending search for truth, what is the actual method? How does one do it? Well, this philosophy provides a particularly potent metaphor for this internal work. The unexamined intellect, our own mind in its natural state, is symbolized by a rough ashlar. This is a stone, freshly quarried from the earth, crude, unfinished, imperfect. This stone represents our mind as we find it, complete with its inherent cognitive biases, its unexamined assumptions, and of course, the very false certainties that we have just been discussing. The work of intellectual honesty, therefore, becomes the work of the stonemason. It is the methodical, deliberate process of shaping this rough stone into something true and polished. This requires, first, the difficult task of identifying one's own dogmas, the things we believe without question. Second, it requires the rigorous challenging of inherited prejudices and unthinking assumptions. And third, it demands the courageous, necessary act of discarding convictions, even deeply held ones, when they are found to be baseless. Specific intellectual tools for this very task are clearly articulated within the French Masonic tradition. The principle of ad dogmatism mandates that no doctrine, no matter how sacred, is immune from scrutiny. Libre examen, or free inquiry, demands that all ideas, regardless of their authoritative source, be subjected to painstaking rational analysis. And finally, probity represents an overarching commitment to personal honor and integrity that must govern this entire internal process. Now, a philosophy is only as robust as its capacity for self-application. It must be willing to turn its critical lens upon itself. We can observe this very principle of intellectual honesty in action by examining how the study of Masonic history itself has evolved over time. You see, the historiography of Freemasonry has undergone a profound transformation. Early histories were often what the Germans call Entstehungslegenden, origin myths. They were stories designed to create a venerable, ancient lineage, often based on legend rather than fact. In stark contrast, the modern academic discipline of Masonology subjects the institution to the same rigorous historical and sociological methods as any other subject of serious inquiry. It demands evidence and critical analysis over foundational legends. And as a concrete demonstration of this very standard, consider the Groupe de Recherche Alpine, a Masonic research body in Switzerland. It explicitly mandates that all of its published works must meet scientific criteria. Its internal regulations state that objectivity, solid documentation, and verifiable sources are absolute prerequisites for publication. In doing so, it formally rejects hearsay and unsubstantiated claims, applying intellectual honesty to its own history. So we may now address the ultimate question of relevance. This is all fascinating, historically and philosophically, but how does this centuries-old intellectual architecture apply to the distinct and very modern challenges of our contemporary information environment? Well, the problem we began with, this post-truth condition, is defined by the constant proliferation of narratives. These are stories specifically engineered to elicit a strong emotional response and to foster that feeling of subjective certainty, very often in direct opposition to the verifiable facts of the matter. This Masonic framework, this commitment to intellectual honesty, serves as a direct and potent countermeasure. It is, at its core, a discipline for drawing and for maintaining a strict, clear demarcation, a line in the sand between that which is supported by objective evidence and that which is merely desired to be true, a phenomenon we all know as wishful thinking. Therefore, that ancient metaphor of sculpting the rough ashlar assumes a new and modern urgency. This internal work, this patient shaping of the stone of one's own mind, is today a form of mental defense. It is a necessary discipline for cultivating a mind that is resilient to the pervasive, powerful forces of digital manipulation and strategic misinformation that we all face every single day. And this returns us, finally, to the search for light. This quote reveals its deepest meaning. The pursuit of knowledge, the search for light, involves not only the capacity for perception, the ability to see, but also the profound moral courage to accept reality as it is revealed to us, even, and perhaps especially, when it conflicts with our most cherished beliefs. And so we conclude by turning the inquiry upon you, the listener. In your own intellectual life, in your own search for knowledge, what are the unexamined assumptions? What are the cherished dogmas? What are the comforting certainties? In other words, what is the rough ashlar that awaits the discipline of the sculptor's tools? To be continued. Support us. Please like and subscribe to our channel.